So after 30 seconds. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Focal Points. Today, our special guest is Army Blackhawk helicopter pilot Brandon Budge, who refused the mRNA shot when it was an EUA experimental countermeasure. And now, despite Trump's executive order, despite Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth's memo regarding vaccine mandates in the military, it appears that Brandon Budge is still facing absolute nonsense, and it appears to be punishment for not taking the shot when they told him to. So Brandon, tell us a bit about yourself. What happened, and what's going on?
Brandon Budge, I'm a Chief Warrant Officer in the United States Army, Blackhawk pilot. I'm a maintenance test pilot. I've been an air assault pilot most of my career. I've got more than 21 years, almost 22 years of total service. I've deployed to Afghanistan a couple of times. I've deployed to the Middle East, other areas as well. So what's going on with me is my wife and I, we've got 7 kids, 6 still at home. Our youngest is 3, our oldest is 21. And at the time of the rollout of the mandates, I had 18 years in the service, and I refused the vaccine. I don't even know if we should call it a vaccine at this point now that we have all the information, but I refused the shot. And in the Army, in the military in general, we were provided an EUA product. It's emergency use authorization. So essentially it was still in its experimental stages. And as everybody knows, you can't experiment you can't experiment unwittingly or unknowingly on individuals. They have to give their confirmed consent. And that was not happening. And so it got to the point where careers were being threatened. People were being treated as pariahs that had questions. Some people filed religious exemptions. Some people, like myself, were more concerned with the safety and effectiveness. As well, I had COVID and I had been asymptomatic. I hadn't had issues with the time that I had COVID. So my question is why do I need to have this injection if I've already had it? And so I resisted the COVID mandate, and they just continually turned up the heat. When I say they, it was my command at the time. And it was, travel restrictions were changed. I was called into offices and threatened. At one point, I was the only person that was required to wear a mask at the hangar I worked at because I was an unvaccinated individual. This was in July of 21. And that was following the time when the military had lifted the mask mandates. People were starting to receive this shot. And so those were lifted, but I was still required to wear one because I was one of the people that was pushing back. And I refused at first, and that caused a whole bunch of heartache as well. And so I singled myself out with my refusal, and then the way that I treated kind of this forced compliance in resisting it. And then my wife was pregnant at the time. It was with our last one. He's 3 now. His name is Ellison, and she was high risk and had already had some complications. And I was slated to leave in September for Korea, September of 21. And so I submitted a request for an extension so I could stay in the States, so I could be here for the birth of Ellison. The doctor said that because of my wife's risk status, that she would lose, that there was the chance that not only could we lose the baby, but that he would probably have to deliver the baby early. And he wrote a letter to my command stating all of those facts and requested that I stay, and I was denied. that request. And so I got a call from an individual in the command at Korea, and it was explained to me in no uncertain terms that if I did not receive the shot, that I would not be sent home. Even in the case that my wife found herself on her deathbed, I was told,
Mm,
even if your wife's on her deathbed, you will not be coming home. You cannot bypass the travel restrictions and the quarantine requirements. And so I elected to get the mRNA shot, but what I did is I went out on my own and I got it at a Walgreens. I scheduled an appointment because I found they had a supply of the FDA approved shot. And so that probably upset some individuals. I can't say 100% that I was still refusing what was available on post, and I went off post to get it on my own. Um, and that's when everything really fell apart. In the end, I was given a general officer's memorandum of reprimand. I lost my promotion to CW4 after I'd been selected for it. That was taken from me, which meant nearly $1,000 a month in pay. Um, and that's been since February of 22. Um, I was put through a flying evaluation board to take away my flight status. That flying evaluation board unanimously ruled in my favor and stated that I had done no wrong. They looked at all of the evidence and they concluded that there was no wrongdoing. There wasn't even evidence in their findings to even conduct a flying evaluation board. Um, but that didn't stop my command from doing those things. And then, despite the findings of the flying evaluation board, the the command still attempted to take away my flight status. I got lucky and some key individuals changed out and I was able to maintain my flight status, but I didn't fly for 18 months because of all of this. And so I wasn't able to do my job. I wasn't allowed to do my job. It was just, they strip everything from you and they isolate you. And through those means, they receive what they want, forced compliance, but they don't stop there because you've already pushed back. And so they continue to push. And if you look, you can pull I think it's military one source data. You can pull that data and you can see that in the United States military, in the last 4 years, suicides increased drastically. But 30% of those suicides were individuals being targeted by administrative or legal action. That was a 10% increase from the previous 4 years. So you look at that drastic increase and it's telling. We descended into this investigative and lawfare culture, even within the military, where lawyers led and leaders stopped leading. And it can be directly attributed to this increase in suicides. When you isolate people, you take away their support. They don't have anybody. Families fell apart. The pressure was so great that it absolutely ruined lives, not just in pay and benefits, but families were destroyed. Confidence was destroyed. Sense of being and meaning, those were destroyed. There was no limit to what individuals would do. I have friends that their commander sent them to mental health and asked stupid questions like, do you think the 2020 election was rigged or stolen from President Trump? That had no bearing on what was going on, but they were doing everything. It was like this desperate grab. And so everything was on the table as far as what could be done and the means and methods that could be used to affect and impact people's lives in a negative manner.
mm, So I mean, that's so disappointing to hear. It truly is. And at least from what the public understands at this point, we thought that all this was being reversed. They were righting the wrongs for an unlawful order of mandating experimental genetic countermeasures. What's happening now? So now Trump's in and they're saying all this stuff. Do you think that's true? But it appears in your case, you're still facing punishment.
I
Um,
am. As far as its truth, my gut feeling is that Secretary Hegseth, President Trump, they mean what they say. Secretary Hegseth, there was a memo on 7 May that officially deemed the mandate unlawful. It was illegal. It was overbroad. It was overbearing. Um, the problem is you have a lot of old guard that are in place, people that don't want to relinquish, and so there have been emails that have circled um, and circulated within the Department of Defense that have mentioned something that was deemed malicious compliance and an encouragement to maliciously comply with the orders of the president, the orders of Secretary Hegseth. That idea of malicious compliance plays exactly into what's happening now. Like in my case, in other individuals' cases that have applied to the Board of Correction and Military Records and they've been denied relief, that very scenario, in my mind, of course, I only speak for myself. I don't represent anybody except for myself in any official capacity. But you just have to connect the dots. You just need uh, the ability to just look even at at the surface level stuff, and you can see that there is an absolute push for that malicious compliance. Well, we looked at it like you told us to, but we didn't grant relief, despite the fact that you labeled it illegal. If something is an illegal order, anything that occurred because of that illegal order, logic would tell you should be reversed, because you can't punish people under the guises of illegality. But I mean, all of the families that can never be recovered, it's too late. Um, it's too late to put families back together. It's too late to give people back their health that they lost. It's too late to reverse the strokes or the myocarditis and pericarditis. It's too late to reverse any of those things. It's too late to reverse divorces and different things that happened under the immense amount of stress. It's too late to bring people back that chose suicide. Um, and leaders that have recognized these things, I won't give names, and have lamented their decisions, their excuse is I was just doing what I was told, or it was my career or theirs. When you're a leader and you choose your career over your subordinates' careers, it breaks down trust in the military complex, right? So we reached a low point. You saw it's recruiting numbers were way down. People didn't want to be any part of it. Recruiting numbers are up because there's hope. But when you have the same people in place, that same old guard, that hope will quickly be reduced when people start to realize that the same people are still in charge at the lower levels, and those same people are still enacting their will and not the will of President Trump, Secretary Hegseth. I don't know much about Secretary Driscoll as far as the Sec Army is concerned. Um, I've read about him, and nobody that I've met with knows him. But in my case, I've had help from individuals. General Mike Flynn has been very helpful. Um, a man named Jared Sessler has been really supportive. Of course, the whole community of people that have been affected by this. Davis Yance has been tremendously helpful. But my wife and I have spent nearly $40,000 in legal fees. And I had to resubmit my packet to the BCMR. We've still got 6 kids at home. Like, we're at the point where this is stretching us so drastically financially that we don't know what we're going to do.
So they denied your appeal to basically stay in the army, right? They
to
denied
to
that.
reverse, yep, for relief, to reverse the damage, to grant me my promotion, my back pay. Yes, they denied those things.
And if they don't do it, and so if they continue and they don't change anything by September 1st,
I'm done.
they'll be discharging you. Is that correct?
Yes. Uh-huh. So I'll be forced retired. um and the crazy thing is there were individuals at the very top that promised that this would get fixed. And when this ruling came out from the BCMR that they were denying my appeal for relief, that office is silent. They don't want to take any action to help after the promises to help. And so what do you do? And that's where that desperation sets in for a lot of people, um, because they've just, you can't fight this Goliath um, that is the Department of Defense, the United States government. Um, it's the system is stacked in a way that it works against the guys at the lowest level, the guys and gals at the lowest level. Um, and it has absolutely been destructive, and it needs to change.
That it does need to change, and we see the same sort of situation. I believe with the Health and Human Services and the FDA and lower people in the FDA. Just as we saw recently, they approved the next generation Moderna injection without any placebo trials, without any proper testing, despite HHS saying they would be requiring placebo trials. So yeah, it seems in the public health agencies it's the same situation. Despite what leadership has been saying, they are going against the grain. They're doing whatever they want. There's still people that subscribe to what's called vaccine ideology, where they kind of go crazy and expect everybody to receive a genetic injection. And why would it's so concerning because now the estimated American death toll from these shots is 470 to 600,000 American deaths, and this is a catastrophe, right? I mean, this is rivaling the death toll of civil war at this point. And so yeah, we're very concerned now. What do you think needs to happen next? What do you think can be done? Can Trump or Hegseth do something about this?
They
What needs to
can,
happen?
they can. It would require much more of their attention, and I know that they're already stretched pretty thin with everything that's going on. But there was a proposal put forward by um, a few individuals that's called COMCAP, and it's an entire document that lays out exactly um, how to set up a board that would be temporary in nature and would be only for examining and granting relief to anybody that was affected by the mandate over the last 4 years. And so that board would allow the BCMR to be taken out of the equation and for a group of individuals to look only at the cases related to the mandate. Um, it would be efficient, it would be effective. COMCAP is the thing that needs to happen. It would take the responsibility, it would take the weight off of the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Army, and the other secretaries of the other services. It would be the load bearing entity in granting relief for all of the individuals that were affected by COVID. Because some people are like myself, they were affected because they got bad officer evaluation reports or non-commissioned officer evaluation reports, NCOERs. There are people that were affected that way. And so their careers were stifled because they were given poor evaluations because of their refusal to take a vaccine. In my case, one of my medical providers stated in an official document that he was annoyed by me because of my resistance to the vaccine, that I had annoyed him about the vaccine.
Mm.
And at one point shouted, according to one of the individuals that works at the clinic, that he would ruin my career and he would make sure that I never flew again in the Army or in the civilian world. This is a medical provider. Um, that, but that's how ingrained and indoctrinated people became and how tribal people became over this. There was no discussion, there was no logical progression of the methods and means in which we handled people that had questions about it or doubted its efficacy or its safety profiles. It just was 0 to 100. It was immediate. And the lines were drawn and people were just absolutely decimated that had any type of resistance at all. And so the only thing that can be done, COMCAP is the best thing that I've seen so far.
Interesting, interesting. Well, something needs to happen clearly because people like you, other service members, do not deserve this absolutely terrible treatment for choosing not to partake in an experiment. And this really does have to be reversed and addressed. I mean, yeah, I mean, so you said you've served for 22 years.
Almost. Yes, and I mean it's not just military either. There in the U.S. there are law enforcement officers, firefighters, nurses, doctors, even Department of Transportation workers uh, that refused. They literally were driving plow trucks by themselves in a truck, nobody else around. You don't want the vaccine, you're fired. Like, get it? I mean, they, they pose no threat to anybody riding in a truck by themselves. It doesn't matter if the vaccine was 100% effective. They are not going to transmit it to nobody because
Right,
there's
and we
nobody
know
with
it
them.
it does not reduce transmission at all. It is without a doubt 100% proven. In fact,
Yep.
it increases your risk of infection dose dependently. And so, yeah, absolute nonsense.
So you start to affect public works. You start to affect uh, safety of the public because you're taking law enforcement and firefighters out of the fight. Now you're affecting people's health because they don't have access to doctors and nurses. In fact, the funny thing is my wife, she did have to be induced early because when we went to the hospital for her checkup, the head nurse at the hospital in Wenatchee, Washington, told us we had 8 nurses walk out today. If you leave here today and you go into labor tomorrow, we don't know if we can get you back in if we have the staff to do so.
Mm, mm,
And that's where we went. We affected our national security. We affected public safety and security, public health. It didn't matter. It was it was absolutely just, it was like living in the Twilight Zone, that old black and white TV show. Like, you would hope that people would catch on and they would get smart, and but people were so entrenched in this tribal ideology. The military was a microcosm, and unfortunately the military, because of the way it's set up, they were able to do things that some of the other services weren't, you know, public services weren't able to do, because they not only did they ruin your life in the military, they gave other than honorable and not and non honor or dishonorable discharges, and now people are having to go back and apply for upgrades to those discharge statuses, and those things follow you the rest of your life. So if somebody has a dishonorable discharge over an experimental shot and they go to get a job, that stuff can come up, and now they've got to answer for that, something they should have never had to answer for in the first place.
right, right.
But they
The-
made sure, some commanders absolutely made sure that this would follow the what they labeled as detractors for the
mm,
rest of their lives.
I mean, I just don't get why would they want to induce heart damage, in the fighting force. I don't understand. Like, how is that going? That's not going to improve.
Yeah.
You're just destroying your own force. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, she testified about this information. Ted Macy, he actually posted online a video of the DMED data and all of the individuals that the increase. But Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, she was in a unique place because it was aviation. Like I mentioned, she was a doctor in the aviation sphere, and her concern is why are we putting and I don't speak for her, but just from what I've read and in the short conversations and things, why are we putting air crews that have had this vaccine, this shot, up in the air when they are at increased risk for cardiovascular events? And the data supported her position. Why are we giving this to air crews when they provide a service that could immediately become uh, a life or death situation because somebody has a heart attack in a cockpit, or a
Right,
stroke, or some sort of, a blood clot causes a pulmonary embolism, who knows?
right,
um and so she was met with absolute angst by the aviation community within the Army, and you would think somebody in a medical position to stick their hand up and say, well, hold on, that somebody would listen. But no, that tribal mentality that we cling so desperately to took hold, and even somebody that's they've chosen that as their profession, they've collected the data, they were cast out as well.
wow. Well, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this super important story, and I want to thank you for your service to the country. This should not be happening to you. This is ridiculous. I really do hope this gets the attention of upper leadership to, remedy this situation for not only you but all the others. And that would, I would hope, have a downstream effect that would positively affect all those who have been, dearly harmed by these ridiculous mandates and policies. So is there anything else you want to say? Any important last word or message that you want to get out?
Yeah, it's people just keep keep pushing the message. Um, keep pushing forward. I mean, this is an endurance race. It's not a fast thing that's going to happen. I told the analogy yesterday. At one time in my career in Afghanistan, um, we lost two guys in January of 16, and I ran 100 miles on a treadmill to raise money for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. I wasn't the only one that ran an ultra marathon. I just did it on a treadmill because I was in Afghanistan. I didn't have anywhere else to run 100 miles, right? So, um, and at one point, a friend of mine came, and I remember he leaned on the treadmill and he looked where I was at, and I was at 81 miles. Um, and he said, "You're almost done." And it didn't feel like I was almost done from my perspective. Everything hurt. Um, and you stop and you think when everything hurts, you're like, no, I've got 19 miles left. That's nearly a marathon. That's not almost done by any means. But in my friend's mind, I was 81% complete essentially. I was at 81 miles. I was almost there. And so we have to look at perspective, and we have to have that perspective that even though it feels like there's a lot left, we really are almost done. We're almost to that point. We can't give up yet. And so I would encourage everybody that's fighting for the military, people that are in the military that are fighting to make this right, that we just, no matter how much it hurts, that we keep pushing forward. I know the financial situations are dire. I know that every time you turn around, it seems like it's a loss, but we have to keep pushing forward. It's the only way we right these wrongs, and we make sure that they don't happen again.
Yes, those are some very wise words, and I agree. We got to keep pushing. We're almost there, and I do think we will win in the end. I really do. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. Is there anywhere where people can go that you want people to check out? Any links?
Just follow on X. Follow people like Mark Bashaw. Follow people like Colonel Teresa Long. Follow General Flynn. Follow Jordan Carr. Follow Adam Dortona at Infantry Dort, or Ted Macy or his wife Mara Macy. Um, Myself, I think mine's Substitutions or something like that, or Lucky Seven. Um, So follow those things. Seth Ritter is another one. All of these people, Sam Shoemate, Our Country, Our Choice, Colonel McGregor, they're people that are all in the fight. Stars, STARRS is a great one.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And actually, I want to pull something up here. We're getting some comments here by our viewers, and I just want to show an example here. So this guy's name is Jocelyn, and so this is what we face often. We get reported very often by people, and they claim that people like you who face such a terrible situation are posting misinformation. Right? This is not misinformation at all. Like, do you think this is misinformation, Brandon?
No, it's not misinformation. It's information. And if we don't have meaningful discussions, because people are too, I keep saying tribal, but that's exactly what it comes down to. They're too entrenched to even entertain the fact that maybe they've got the wrong information, or maybe they don't have all of the information. Um, we see that all over, and this is nothing new. I mean, uh, people hate each other because of religion. People hate each other because of the type of shoe they like to wear, the car they like to drive. I mean, it's absolutely insane. The party they may affiliate themselves with politically. And so it comes as no surprise at all when you see things like this, that this stuff is actually occurring. That people are being blocked. I think it says something about LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, because of potential misinformation, or YouTube videos removed because they suggested that maybe mRNA shot is not as effective as it claims to be. Or they post anecdotal evidence like, hey, I had this shot and 3 days later I had a blood clot and I was in the hospital on blood thinners. It's things like that that make you wonder, are we ever going to get all of the information because people are so willing to shut it down before any conversation can be had?
Yes, yes. We need to have this conversation. We can't just selectively choose what we don't like to hear and report it for misinformation and hope it gets wiped out, right? We all need to come
Yeah,
together and have proper discussion, right? The time of censorship is over. We got to get away from that. Well, Brandon, again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on, and thank you again for your service.
absolutely. I appreciate you, sir. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Bye.